Okay, so you're on week 9, and then you basically we'll talk about external vendors, basically beat packages, which is not my specialty actually, beat packages. So I'll take on what the gentleman did on his shell. Voiceover recordings, which I did quite a bit. We just did quite a bit of it for that Rocket Solver game. Working with a composer, I did that also not long ago. And licensing music, that's all pretty tricky and fairly common things. Now, before we going into it, sound and music are very important. All right, they are pretty much half of your game is like sound. Like 40% should be sound in reality, because you can't really stop sound the way you can stop visual. All right, what I mean is that most of the people are visual people. Few people are sound, audio people. Okay, musicians, audio. I don't know exactly the percentage, so I won't give exactly a number. But I think it's like 90% of people are visual, and only like 10% or less than that are audio, musician people. All right. Most of the time, audio people are in the music industry. All right, because it's so rare. Okay, I know I'm a visual person, totally not an audio person. Okay, though I like music, I know it fairly well, I'm not an audio person. Okay, it's very rare. Now, if you're an audio person, I would say, hey, and you love video game, get into it, because there's definitely a huge business for that. All right, because few people actually do it well. Now, let's start talking about let's go backward a little bit, because that's what I know better actually, the music and composition, recording, and not the beat packages as much. Voiceover recording. Now, it is very important to choose. So basically, you have multiple types of sound you're gonna use in a game. All right, you're definitely gonna have dialogues. All right, so voiceover recording. You're gonna have effects. You know, explosion, grenade shooting, punching. You know, a lot of effects. You know, wind and so forth. You know, and you're gonna also have the music, basically. All right, the soundtrack itself. Okay, those are three very, very important things. Now, the music itself, I think, is the hardest part. All right, this is where you need to have the most talented musician, basically, in your team, is in the soundtrack, because the soundtrack will give the mood of what's going on. Okay, could be. And it's very important, because like say a game like Doom 3, the latest Doom, you know what I'm saying? You might enter in a room and the soundtrack changes into something scarier that will tell you something, you know, is bound to happen. You know, it's something scary that can threaten you, basically. If it's nice and easy, then you understand what's going on. All right, so that's very, very important for that mainly. And few people can do good soundtracks. A lot of the people that I've seen doing soundtrack for me were doing soundtrack that were too computerized. You know what I'm saying? Too gimmicky. You know what I'm saying? Not enough orchestra sound in reality. Not enough wind and violins. You know, a real orchestra basically. If you are getting to do a triple A, you're gonna have to hire an orchestra basically, and it's super expensive. It's like $15,000 a day. All right. Damn. Yeah, because I know that, because we for the Rocket Solver, that's what they wanted at first, and they couldn't afford it basically. So that's when we hired someone that I knew, and I thought it was better than that. He did very good for the effects, and you know, and the voice recording he did okay, because he was just technically involved with it. But for the music that he did, it's too gimmicky, it's too computerized, it uses too much keyboards and stuff like that, synthesize, you know what I'm saying, synthesizers, and not enough orchestra for me, okay, which make it cheesy, alright, you know what I'm saying, guys, it sounds cheap, a little bit cheesy, alright, so you want to be very careful, you need to get someone real good, and that's real hard, okay, because there's always a parallel with the 3D cartoon industry and movie visual effects with games. In Burbanks, for example, in Cartoon Networks, those guys, they don't do any of the real production. They mainly do pre-prod and post-prod. All right, basically the art file and the editing of the animation, basically. But what they do, and it's the most important for them, is they have a fairly big lab, an audio lab. All right, because they say voiceover. So now let's go to voiceover. Voiceover recording is very, very important to really enhance what's going on. Okay, and because of that, it needs to be done by them. All right, and I do agree in the industry, in the game industry, it's the same thing. You need to be very careful with it. You need to pick definitely the people that will transcend the characters of you're seeing, basically. All right, so the voice is to stick perfectly to it. All right, you couldn't have a Marcus Gere talk like a little girl. You know, saying they wouldn't work very well. Okay, in the whole story, it has to be a big band. Or that wouldn't work very well. It's to stick, and the better you choose that, the more you will transcend your character. All right, and make your work even better. Okay, and that's what people forget all the time. And that's you have the localization that has to do with that too, what we talked 2 weeks ago. Because if you're doing a game from multiple countries, you better know what the heck in those countries are expecting for those type of voices, which is always very different than what you think it would be in your country. All right. Again, talking about localization in the voiceover recording, you better know also what can be seen as wrong in world languages in that country socially. All right, because in yours it might not be, but in theirs it might be. Like in France, talking sex is not very bad. I mean, you know what I'm saying? They're pretty open to that type of things. In the US, right away you put nude content, and sex language, and right away you'll have all the parents association on your back and so forth. All right, and you might not pass certain check that they have, let's say, for the Xbox Live Arcade and so forth. All right, so be very aware of that. Now, the recording of the voiceover needs to be done before you do the art. The recording of the voiceover needs to be done right away, as fast as possible in reality. Why? Because the animation of the art is to be timed on the voice. You know what I'm saying? Which is not the case of the effects we'll talk about later on. Okay, that's not the same. Alright. So the voiceover, that was the main errors those guys in the Rocket Solver game did. It's like they didn't do any voiceover. They were starting to do all the animation. I'm like, what the heck you guys are doing? How are you gonna do that? You're gonna look at the animation and talk over it? It's what they used to do in the 40s and 20s, in the 40s and 50s. I mean, in the movies, we don't do that much anymore. We still do it to sub, you know what I'm saying, for localization, basically, because that's the only way you can do it with live actors, all right? But it never really sound as well, and that's why in France, for example, people never really go see French version of an American movie in the movie theater. They'll go read the subtitle. I'm not kidding you. I know it's hard for the US to understand that, because here they'll go right away for the English version. They hate reading subtitles, okay? Not in France, okay, or in Europe. Coming for subtitles, the reason also in video game you always have subtitles, you guys, you know that? It has to do with sound. Because not everybody will play with the sound. Not every computer used to have an audio card. You know what I'm saying? Everybody should be able to play the game even without listening to it. So they will always put it with a caption at the bottom, which I think is nice. It's cool, that doesn't really bother me. So that should work very well, and also the composition should go with the type of the game, obviously, just like the voice recording. And now you go to the effects. All right, and the effects, you have two ways you can go with that. You can basically record your own effects, which I would advise to do. Yeah, I think that's much better in quality. If you can do it, if you're good enough to do that, or you can buy database of soundtracks, which is easy, very well done, give you a really high quality right away. The only problem for me with that is that my database of sound is the same than your database of sound and the same of your database of sound. So meaning that every game sounds the freaking same. It's like buying database of textures. I hate that. That's why most of those freaking games look the same very often, because they steal the same texture left and right from the net, most likely. All right, because it doesn't really matter. The DPI is still at 72 DPI artistically, really. Anyway, so that's, you have to be very careful with that. Now, the sound should be, any of those sound should be compressed as much as you can, frankly, because that's my main problem with sound. It is huge in size when you want to have to good quality. All right, a WAV file. I mean, to give you an example, one of my game, I got lucky, and I've not published that game at all because that's a game I'm doing just with two guys, buddies of mine. We've been 3 years on it, something like that. But we have one full level completely working in a 17 frame HD, and it's like an hour of fun right there. But one of the main problems we had is that I got very lucky. I have one of my best friends was Midnight Friday, he was a singer of that group, 90s heavy metal, dark heavy metal type of things. And but his producer was David Ellefson or Elfison. I never really pronounce his name, but he was I think he was the bass or the keyboard player of Megadeth. One of those two. All right, very nice guy. Lived here and worked at the Soul Project audio place they have right around here. It's right around here at Soul Project River. They have a full complex with a lot of audio recording companies. And he was producing my buddy because my buddy was pretty good. And my buddy did only one CD because he was too old. But anyway, he did that CD and they did decent, but it was really good. And he's not in music anymore. He's a businessman, he has very good money. And I asked him for the music. I said, it's pretty aggressive. My game is pretty aggressive, shooting people and stuff like that. Why don't you, can you give me the music? He's like, yeah, sure, you can use it for free. So I took his music. Getting his WAV file for one song was 700, because I was a master song, was 750 meg per song. Our max was 200 meg for the whole game. You know what I'm saying? So I couldn't even place one song. So we had to compress that. So you have to look first at the game engine and what's the game engine can take in compression. What format does it take? If you could take MP3, that's just great if you can do that. Most likely it won't. Right? I know for us it was Xbox Live Arcade, so XNA. XNA has its own compression format called Exact. It's very similar to MP3, and I'm very suspicious that it is just like MP3. They just don't take MP3 because of royalties, I think. Not, have to pay people that own the thing on MP3. I wouldn't say it's that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But it compresses fairly well. Still compressed, it was pretty big. A little too big for us. It compressed it very well to like 70 megs or 50 megs per song, not even. Actually, maybe 30 megs per song, which is pretty good. It was still a little too big for us. First of all, we'd add the words, because I do believe words are not a bad idea if they stick perfectly to the game. But I think for the players, it's better if there is no words so they can make their own trip on it. Alright? Now, those guys, from what my understanding was still too big, so we had to figure out a system to make it work. What we did is that I cut it in loops, basically. I asked my audio guy to do it. Okay, look at that song, and I want an upbeat loop, a downbeat loop, a riff, which is a regular riff, and maybe something else, 4 or 5 loops, intro, maybe an end, 4 or 5 loops that are, instead of being 7-minute song, are maybe 10, 20 seconds loops that are seamless, that plays over and over, playing up, and that can be mixed up together perfectly because it comes from the same song anyway. Alright, so the rhythm and everything, the riff is the same. Alright, and you play it when needed. It works better in multiple ways. First of all, it is more connected to the gameplay itself. So if really the player has not much blood left or is in fight for his death, fight for his life, you might want to play the really hardcore loop, you know what I'm saying? To really pump him up, make him aggressive. Okay? stuff like that. You know what I'm saying?